Welcome to the Cripescast. I'm your host, Charlie Behrens. We are powered by Everlight Solar, and here is today's episode. Hello, folks. How we doing? It's a very special day to me because this is a podcast I've been looking forward to doing for a long, long time. Yes, it is all about artificial intelligence. And for those of you who are like rolling your eyes, saying this doesn't affect me at all, don't go anywhere.
Yeah, don't. Honestly.
Because it's going to affect you, whether you want it to or not. And my goal with this podcast is to make it so you are as prepared as possible for the introduction of artificial intelligence or continued introduction of artificial intelligence into our society. And I mean this from the perspective of your job, but also the perspective of your safety and the perspective of how we as humans can interact with each other to help ensure AI safety and how we act and interact with ourselves. And I forgot to ask if we should be nice to the computers too. Anyways, that'll be for a different podcast. How we interact with ourselves and how we encourage others to respond, and the types of ways we interact with technology. And by that, I mean double checking sources, all this stuff that sounds kind of boring. So it's never been more important to do this stuff. And so, Colleen,
as your fellow layman and like general, like representative of the general population, let me just say, it's an easy, like they really help explain a lot of stuff. I'm not even just saying this because I work for you. Like, and I'm not saying this because I'm producing the podcast. Like, it's not like, it's something that we, if you've watched the podcast and you know I roll my eyes every time he says AI, I'm being dead honest. Like, it helps. Like, listen to this.
Colleen's superpower in this podcast, she has an integral role of representing
the village idiot.
Not the village idiot.
I'm saying that to myself.
But I think what your approach to AI was mine for a long time until I honestly started using it and realized, oh, shoot, my job's in jeopardy. So once I found that it was important to me, so I'm not like smart, I just am selfish. But that's what got me into it. And Colleen, you know, you've kind of taken this approach of like, I don't want to, what does it matter? Is it really that big of a deal? Is it really going to take over?
I think like when we were talking about it and doing like the pre-production of it, I just kept on asking, so why does it matter? Yeah. And it's not that I don't think that it does. I just want to understand how it impacts me. In
the simplest terms. And so it's great. We've had you over here behind the camera. And when something didn't kind of make sense in the podcast, you chimed in. So really great in a lot of great areas to have Provost really dive into that. So it was a great ad.
I brought up Wally. And that's like the most important part.
Yeah. That was a great question though.
But yeah, no, I think it's like, it's a very, it's a food for thought podcast. And I think it's important. You guys cover a lot of great stuff, and having you guys both be, obviously he's like an expert and you're someone that also has an expert level of Googling about it.
Yeah. It's because I'm like an expert in the way like Aaron Rodgers is an expert on immunizations. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm like a guy that's as much as I have. A guy with interest. I'm a enthusiast.
Yeah. I would say like over the general population, you have more, like you've read more about it, you have more interest about it. Whereas like me, it's like it's probably, and like disclaimer, it's probably not wise the way that I am approaching it. I only want to approach it once it's affecting me, which is so reactive, not proactive.
Right. And I think what we're trying to do is give you guys as much information as possible in this podcast so you can be proactive and not reactive. And I know for some people, it's like, you know, you have this job that you've done. And Provost, by the way, before I dive into that, which is an important point, I just want to let you know a little bit more about Provost Isbell. He is a computationalist, a researcher, an educator. He is an advocate for access to higher education. He received his Bachelor of Science degree from Georgia Tech continued his education at the Artificial Intelligence Laboratory at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, ladies and gents.
Damn.
After earning his PhD from MIT in 98, Provost Isbell joined AT&T Labs research. In the fall of 2002, he returned to Georgia Tech to join the faculty of the College of Computing. And I'm reading all this because it's so impressive.
Yeah,
so,
what did we get degrees in?
What's that?
What did we get degrees in?
I don't even want to go into what I...
You know what I mean? Like, this is
we
why he's
are
the expert.
a couple journalism majors here.
Yeah.
One of us took it more seriously than the other. And
You. And like, but
hang on, I'm not done.
keep going.
In 2008, he became an associate dean for the college, and that college again is Georgia Tech. 4 years later, in 2012, he became the senior associate dean. In 2017, became the executive associate dean. In 2019, he became the fourth dean of the college. And again, that's all Georgia Tech. So he's a smart dude.
The proof is in the pudding.
The proof is in the pudding. And he is an expert in artificial intelligence, and he is what he's doing at the University of Wisconsin with the Wisconsin idea, which Colleen, being a proud Badger, you know all about the Wisconsin idea. Is this the Wisconsin idea?
It's the Wisconsin hands.
You know, but the Wisconsin idea is something very specific. And I'll just say from being at the journalism school at the University of Wisconsin, you know, what's written on the side of the building is through the continued sifting and winnowing through which truth alone can be found. So that's an important aspect to what the conversation we're going to go into. Sifting and winnowing is how you find truth. That is so necessary today. You'll find through this conversation with Provost Isbell that it is going to be on all of us individually to take responsibility to make sure that the information that we're learning, and even the information you get in this podcast, check it, you know, especially if I'm saying it, for God's sake. Double check it, triple check it. Understand where your sources are coming from. Understand who has an interest in the source you're reading, you know. A lot of sources just don't waste your time with if you know they have a bias. I mean, that's my personal opinion, but if you want to watch Fox News, MSNBC, God bless. But I think that there's going to be a lot of responsibility on us as individuals to really understand where information is coming from, really be researchers and honest researchers and journalists individually, and also to increase our capacity to love, especially those that may not agree with us. Mm-hmm. And there's going to be some hippie talk in this, but there's reasons to do it selfishly and to do it for yourself if you don't want to do it for the right reasons, or if you're like, really? I got to like a guy who likes that guy or would vote for that guy, you know. So anyways.
It's the main thing that you guys really honed in on too is short-term versus long-term.
Yes.
And I was kind of thinking about it like, I felt like I was on a plane and he was like the flight attendant, and like, I'm not going to worry if he's not worried. And so like watching you guys talk and him talking and like kind of bringing down like to reality how, if I should be worried about something or not, like him being calm about it and having this knowledge and career and like kind of putting into perspective of like how much I should worry about it made me feel more at ease.
You know what? That is a really great analogy.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Because I am the guy who's scared of flying.
You're the person next to me hyperventilating in a paper bag. You're like,
and you're over here. Well, okay, if that's me, you're over here like, are we on a bus right now? What the hell is happening?
My shoes are off.
Yeah. Your shoes are for sure off.
And
no.
I'm like playing solitaire.
Yeah.
So
no,
that is like,
that's a great analogy.
Like listening to this podcast, producing it and asking questions and where we're going, I felt more at ease of like someone who is so ingrained in it and has been into it since he was 8 years old, and had such a like love for computers and robots and all this type of thing. Like that made me feel so much better about it. Because I think like another thing is too, when he was saying, I don't want to give away the whole thing, but there's a lot of parts in here where he was like, if you are too overwhelmed and then you just don't do anything about it, that's where I'm at. And that's like the worst outcome that could come from it.
Yeah.
And he explains a lot better. I'm paraphrasing, yada yada. But yeah, I think it's.
But truthfully, if you are in a job right now, and that's a big motivation of mine, is kind of worrying about like one of the immediate or short-term reasons to care about this, because you said he talked about short-term versus long-term. He's saying that from a societal perspective, if we can care 40 years down the line as opposed to 2 years down the line or 1 year about or just about our family, if we can broaden our care to 40 years and make it about all of us, that's really going to help our family. But caring just about your family is, in the long term, not going to.
In the short term.
In the short term, caring just about your family, that could be good for your family.
Yeah.
In the long term, caring just about your family, that's not going to be good for your family.
Yeah. The only thing I think about, and I think I told you this, is just like the short term, some people don't have the privilege to think long term.
No, I understand that. And first of all, I also want to throw this out there is, if you don't have the capacity to think long term, like you're worried about where your next meal is coming from, maybe this podcast is just something to listen to of interest or to just inform you of what's coming. I still think whether you can't put food on the table today, which is a huge problem, or you can, you have a trust fund. I think this podcast is going to be beneficial, and that's my goal. And our goal is to just give you information so you know what's coming. And it's not to scare you, but it's to give you information and also give you some tools that can make you that can allow you to help make this world a better place. And one thing I want you to think about as we have this conversation is like, if you know what your job is and you know that you could imagine how a computer could do it pretty easily, I think it's time to start understanding that could be a reality sooner as opposed to later. Not in a way to freak you out, but just
encouragement of like, how can it, sorry, I cut you off. Encouragement of like, how can you use the tools to, one, be better at your job with the tools, or two, pivot or see other opportunities by using AI.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. How can you embrace AI to be more valuable at your job in maybe the near term, and in the long term? Yeah, exactly. What are other things that interest you that you can maybe start doing on the side and start building up now, Yeah. So anyways, that's a long way of saying
I'm going to start a different business on the side of this one.
Yeah, you should. Your job is in jeopardy.
Yeah.
That's for sure. No, I'm kidding. But anyways, very fun and exciting interview. And I also want to say, like, I've spent a lot of time talking about the negative sides of AI, but there are a lot of positive elements. And I do think if we utilize AI in the best way possible, it's going to be very good. But it's going to be hard to utilize it in the best way possible because there are a lot of systems that we've already seen that are making that difficult. So look at me. I'm trying to talk about the positive. I'm already bringing in the pessimistic. There's a lot of ways and exciting things AI can do. So we talk about those in this podcast as well. And of course, before we get to our podcast today, I want to let everybody know that you can donate to Doctors Without Borders. We are continuing to raise money for Doctors Without Borders. They are doing great work for folks who need medical care around the world, especially in the hardest hit places, specifically the Middle East I'm thinking of right now. You can go to doctorswithoutborders.org. You can also follow them at Doctors Without Borders. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, it is time to have a conversation with the University of Wisconsin-Madison, my alma mater.
Same.
And Colleen's Provost Charles Isbell. We are honored to have him, and here is our conversation. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for coming on and chit-chatting.
Of course.
You got a great first name. I just want to say, as someone who also has that name, so I just want to say, us Charleses have to stick together.
I agree.
Colleen is also sitting here. She is the EP of the podcast. And given the fact that you are, an expert and you're very high level on sort of the AI situation. And I'm kind of like someone who's gone down the rabbit hole a time or two. She's someone more on the opposite end where she, kind of knows, kind of doesn't. But I think, okay, she's shaking her head. She mostly doesn't know. But I think she kind of represents a lot of people who hear AI and maybe tune out. Mm-hmm. And I think it's, and that's, I think the main audience that we're trying to sort of talk to today about giving sort of realistic ideas about what they can expect, not only in the job market, the safety of AI, the fun and cool things of AI, all of that sort of stuff. So, but to begin, can you just give people a sense of your background and how you decided to go into this realm of expertise?
Oh, I'm happy to do it. So I'm happy to tell you anything that you want to know. So let me know if I'm not telling you the secret parts of my life that you weren't hearing anything about. So I will tell you the short version of it all. I have been interested in AI and machine learning and all those various other buzzwords from the time I was about 8 years old. What I was really motivated by was the idea that I could tell a computer what to do and it would be smart and I would be able to build a smart thing. So data from Star Trek: The Next Generation, C-3PO, and from Star Wars, even going back to HAL, just the idea that you could build a machine that was smart and intelligent and would go off and do smart and intelligent things have just ever captured my imagination from the time that before I can even remember. And one of the first things that I did in high school is build a robot. Build something that would run and do really cool things. I fell in love with the idea, and I've been doing it in one form or another ever since.
Nice. Now, I got to ask, which you mentioned Star Trek, you mentioned Star Wars. Mm-hmm. Which one was the movie that inspired you to go down the artificial intelligence train? Do you have a character specifically?
Well, you can't see it, but right over here, I have a replica of a lightsaber, and right next to it, I have a portrait of Captain Sisko from Deep Space Nine. So I am happy to do both of those things, and I find inspiration from both of them.
Okay, cool, nice. It's also funny. I just want to say how sci-fi I feel like has influenced technology today. Or we're starting to see a lot of, like, even in Star Trek, like the early cell phone kind of looks like that, mm-hmm. Which kind of makes sense. Comes from the same brain, our inspiration back then is similar to the one for today. So, and then can you, so that's where your inspiration came from. And then as far as, and then were you in robotics early on? Was this sort of an on your own type thing?
It was both an on your own type thing when I was young and I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I'm old enough that, everyone didn't, well, certainly no one had cell phones, but everyone didn't have their own computer. Everyone didn't have access to these kinds of things. So, you had to be somewhat of a hobbyist just to be interested at all. But I very quickly learned how to do this in school. It's what I spent most of my time doing in my undergraduate degree and all my time doing once I was a graduate student. So I had lots of support as I moved into high school and moved into college to think about this. But the robotics itself wasn't the part that was interesting to me, although the embodiment really matters. It was just the idea that you could do intelligent things and that you could have someone to talk to who was smart and could learn over time. It was kind of like, having a kid without all of the messy parts.
What is your what is the University of Wisconsin currently doing with respect to artificial intelligence, and what are you most excited about there?
So there's a couple answers to your question. So it helps to think about what AI is, and you brought up a little earlier about inspiration. So if I were to give you a definition of AI, I would say that the truth is whatever it is we say, It's really about making computers act the way they do in the movies, right? It's about the kind of magic of having a machine that does something. And what Wisconsin is doing is basic work in AI. People like me who sit around thinking about computer science and deriving equations and actually dealing with the algorithms and that kind of a thing. And that's really important. But what Wisconsin does better than many, many places is because it's such a broad place that has everything and cares about lots and lots and lots of fields. It's thinking about AI in the context of health. It's thinking about AI in the context of human behavior. It's doing these sort of really, really big things. So what excites me about that is that we have an opportunity here, not just to do the AI, as an AI nerd, but to do the AI and understand how it's actually going to impact the world. And so what really, really excites me is the big investment that we're making over the next 3 years in what we call the RISE initiative, and in particular, the RISE AI initiative, where we're going to hire somewhere between 120 and 150 new faculty on top of all the faculty would have hired anyway in these spaces, with the idea of doing something really big at scale that involves the economists, that involves the people in the School of Human Ecology, that involves health, that involves vet med, that involves all of these different parts of the university, and bring it all together to do big, big things in AI and machine learning.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll just go right into the hiring. You're talking about all the people you're hiring because of AI. But I think that obviously it's true that with AI, a lot of jobs are going to go away. Mm-hmm. Do you feel as though that technology is going to progress in a way that allows those people without jobs will find something new right away? Or do you see AI creating large amounts of unemployment, if not in the long term, before we can find them new jobs in the short term?
So you could make a claim not too long ago that new technologies have always gotten rid of some jobs, but created more than they've gotten rid of. I don't see any reason that won't continue to be true, except for one small thing, which is that it's happening so fast that there's lots of short-term disruption. But you know what? Pretend we're not talking about AI or we're talking about machine learning or whatever. What we're really talking about is computers doing things. I mean, not just the roboticists or the robotics that are carving out and deboning chicken faster than human beings can do, which we do have. There's actually a lot of robots that do that, but are actually making some key decisions. So it's affecting a different set of people. It's gone beyond physical labor and repetition and automation to, let's call it thinking labor, and making sort of obvious kinds of or short-term decisions. Those things are going to be easier and more automated. But what it's going to do is free up the ability to make higher level decisions, to be more strategic, to think really carefully about other kinds of things you otherwise would simply not have the time to do. So the people who are in a place where they're prepared to partner with the sort of analysis that AI will be doing in the future will be fine and be able to do more interesting things. Will there be a problem in the short term? Yes. Is this something that's relatively easy to fix if we can provide access to education for people? Absolutely. So, don't ask me about a particular March, April, or May, but ask me about a particular year, and I think we'll be fine over the span of a year or two or three, even if it's going to maybe look scary over a particular month or two.
Yeah, I mean, I think the potential for it to look scary is going to happen largely because of what you brought up, that exponential, or you didn't bring up exponential, you just brought up the rate of growth of this technology. It's just growing faster than technology has in the past, which is sort of a critical thing, I think, for like the layperson to understand, or just your average person to like understand AI. And this I'm bringing up from my perspective because I didn't really think much of it until I learned about sort of the exponential growth of technology. And can you explain the exponential growth of technology, kind of what it is, why people bring it up within the context of AI? Otherwise, I can tell you what I know and you can tell me where I'm getting it wrong.
Sure. So, people use the word exponential just to mean really fast. Oh, this is exponentially more than it was yesterday. Well, That's not what exponential really means. Exponential means that it keeps growing and multiplying at the same rate at every single step. And that moves really, 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 really fast. So when I say it moves exponentially fast, that means I go from 2 to 4, but then 4 to 8, and then 8 to 16 to 32 to 64 to 128. And after 10 steps, I'm in 1,000. But if I were moving linearly or moving at the rate we normally think about it, I'd have only been at 10. So moving from 10 in 10 steps to 1,000 in 10 steps is a really huge deal. So it means that, for example, if I look at all the kind of data in the world that's being generated over the last 10 years, we've gone from the point where we were generating a certain amount of data over the span of a year to a point where we're generating that same amount of data in an hour. Mm-hmm. So imagine change going that fast. You can't possibly, as a human being, react to it quickly enough. So exponential does not just mean really fast or twice as much as you had before. It means 1,000 times more than you had last week and 100,000 more than you had 2 weeks ago. It very quickly moves to a point where you're generating more information than you has ever been generated in the entire history of humanity in the span of a year. And it's going to then be 10 times more than that, and then 100 times more than that. So it's a really big deal. And that can be scary, and scary for good reason. But the good news is we also can't react to it fast enough. So even as technology is outgrowing us, when we're thinking about jobs and opportunities, we can only move so fast in thinking about what it would mean to take advantage of it as well. So things get slowed down by physics, things get slowed down by the kinds of decisions that we're going to have to make. It means we won't take advantage of things as quickly as we could, but it also means it'll give us enough time to be able to react to it. That's the good news. The bad news.
I was just going to go into, because your good news, and you were just bringing up the bad news, because your good news, those sounded good and reassuring. I immediately thought of some bad news in that. And maybe you're about to say that right now. So
tell me what your bad news is, and I'll tell you.
Okay. Well, here's my bad news. Some like OpenAI, which is like creating the just doubling down. They're trying to get to AGI, which I'll let you explain in a second because I'm probably going to screw it up. But it's getting to a point where we get so fast technologically that the computers understand more than people. And now you have all these computers on a level. And let me give you my paranoid doomsday scenario. And you can tell me, yes, that's possible, or no, Charlie, you need to stop smoking things that cause paranoia. Mm-hmm. And I will listen to either of those. But what I'm thinking is you make these computers so smart, 1,000 times smarter than humans or whatever it is. At the same time, you've got these humanoid robots working in the factories, doing the things that humans can do. And then at some point, the computers, since they're smarter than humans, they find a way to connect and link up with these humanoid robots and put their brains in the humanoid robots. And then you have some that's 700 times stronger than us, that's 1,000 times smarter than us, with access to gene editing, because we've got the gene editing. You can kind of make designer babies if you want. Can they then create with that a new human species? And will at the same time you have humans putting in Neuralink or something like Elon Musk's Neuralink that is currently helping people with neurodegenerative diseases become fine. But will you then have sort of these hybrid human computer species and also this computer species, and you have a whole new species that is smarter and stronger and superior. And as humans know, whenever we are the top species, I don't think there's been many examples of a top species looking at a lesser species and not saying, how do we use you for what you can do to serve us, or just kill you altogether? We got a lot of, species around the planet that we've sort of sent by the wayside just for our progress. So that's doomsday scenario, like the Terminators. Pretty much every sci-fi movie made about artificial intelligence kind of has some ending in that way. So that would be one scenario. I'll lay it out there for you to let me know, yeah, that's something to be concerned about, which I think it is, because we have all these AI safety people setting up all sorts of stuff around the world right now. Or that's not as realistic as you might think, and here's some reasons why.
Okay, so one, I appreciate your highly optimistic nature. So I think that's here's my answer.
Hang on. I am optimistic about some of it, but I do have to. I guess I can be a little pessimistic or paranoid, and if it's paranoid, I'm definitely willing to hear it, but it's a thought I can't. I can be creative about good things or bad things, but you should hear the good one. I have a good scenario too there, but that's a bad one.
I mean, I have a bunch of good scenarios, but here's the thing. Here's my answer to your question. It could happen. It's possible. It won't happen. Because in order for it to happen, a bunch of things have to go wrong from our point of view, including the idea that the machines would even be interested in any of this, which isn't clear to me that they would be. I mean, in order for that to be the case, you would have to have a machine that falls into one, or a set of machines that have all these resources. By the way, unclear to me that those resources actually exist and enough. There's enough of it out there that they could move that quickly. But one of two things would have to happen. Well, the first thing would have to happen is we'd have to create AGI, which I don't know that I believe is going to happen anytime soon. But even if we did, they'd have to be interested in subjugating us. I'm not sure why they would be. Or they'd have to not care about us and then do things that have the side effect of destroying us and not notice and not care. And I'm not sure either of those things is actually very likely at the speed at which it would have to happen for us to really lose out in the apocalyptic way that you're describing. It could happen. But that's not what I'm worried. What I'm worried about is that we will use this technology as human beings and we will make decisions where we will harm ourselves. Mm-hmm. I'm not worried about the gun deciding that it wants to shoot us. What I'm worried about is that we will use the gun to shoot us. And we're already doing that. We're already using technology in ways that's harmful for other people. We're much more likely to do it to ourselves than we are for it to do it to us.
And really great point. And real quick, we do have a question from from Colleen, who's coming from Yes, Colleen?
Define the difference between AI and AGI, because you said you're not too concerned about that, but I don't even know what that is.
Great question.
All right. So the way we use it in the sort of popular way is AI is just sort of anything that appears somewhat intelligent, right? It's computing and the various other things that moves in a way that's intelligent. AGI, which is sort of general intelligence, is something that is not just smart or appears intelligent, but appears smart and intelligent about everything or all the ways in which human beings appear to be intelligent. So you can build a system that's really, really good at recognizing people or voices. I mean, we kind of have that now, right? You have your phone, it recognizes your face, it knows it's you. It's very smart at that. That's different from a machine that can figure out any number of things. It can do math, it can write poems, it can run podcasts, it can detect errors and 18,000 things. It can debone chicken. It can do everything and anything. So we think of ourselves as generally smart, that we could learn anything and retain everything we've ever known, versus becoming very good at a very specific thing. So you can be good at a very specific thing and call that AI, or you could be potentially good at everything, a single thing, or a single entity could be good at everything, and we call that artificial general intelligence.
Yeah. Nice. 2 thumbs up. So solid on that explanation from Colleen. And basically what you were saying before that now is your greater concern than the robots figuring it out is humans using it in sort of a improper way. I think before we go farther down the road of that and sort of the skepticism around artificial intelligence, I think the real reality of it is it's there, it's out of the box. Mm-hmm. We've been using it, and either we develop it and understand how to utilize it, or a place like China is going to do the same thing. And kind of the way the world has worked, whoever is on the top edge of the technology curve that's been the way the world has worked, to continue to to follow this technology thing, and they kind of have the best outcomes from that. So I think looking at this in sort of a very positive light, what are you most hopeful about with artificial intelligence, and what gets you excited as a guy who's sort of lived in this world for so long?
It's that we finally gotten to the point that what AI is now good at is things that human beings actually care about, right? So, I could tell a very long, highly technical, and deeply boring story about what AI actually is and how it connects to computing and a whole bunch of things. But at the end of the day, what's changed between 1990 and today is that we don't just have more computing power, which we do. We don't just have more data, which we do, but that computing power is available to everyone, or at least more and more people, and that data is about humans. So what's really neat about this, and where you're actually seeing the kind of things that people are excited about, everyday people are excited about, is that we can think about how to use this technology to make the specific things that people do better. So there's this idea of a centaur, right, which is based on the half horse, half man mythical creature, where it turns out that machines are better than we are at a lot of things. We're better than they are at a bunch of things, and when you put us together, we're even better than either could be alone. So I can write a program that's very good at chess. That would be AI, but it wouldn't be AGI because it's not good at Go or it's not good at soccer, but it's good at chess, and maybe even better than any human chess player alive. It turns out if you pair that incredibly good chess savant with a person who's not even very good at chess, but kind of knows the rules of chess, or at least knows how games work, you will actually get a better joint player than that very smart computer chess player alone. So we are good at some things, very good at pattern matching, very good at understanding what the rules are. And the machines are very, very good at counting very, very, very fast and not getting bored or tired of it. And when you put those two things together, you can do something the human couldn't do alone, and the machine actually wouldn't be very good at doing alone. So now take that from chess to determining your schedule. Take that from chess to figuring out the best way to write a recommendation letter for someone. Do that for helping to come up with a set of interesting questions at a podcast, just to make up a completely random example, right? There's all of these things that you could do that are easier for you as a person, but that a machine on its own almost certainly wouldn't get right. And so it's better for you as the person because it's human fundamentally, but it's a lot less work. It's convenient, it's better, and it makes you better at the thing that you're interested in doing. That I think is exciting because we go back 30 years. That was what was hard to do. I could replace you deboning chicken, but I couldn't help you think about the right set of questions to ask about how to make interesting new dishes that might feed more people more cheaply. And now I can do that because as a person, I think about those things. A machine can help me to do fast analysis.
Yeah. And I think it's where I get the most excited about it is sort of its potential to help us figure out maybe how to sequester carbon using less resources, where that could be a way to help with climate change, or to eliminate plastic, or find alternatives to plastic, but also remove plastic from the ocean, or remove microplastics, because we all have microplastics, or remove PFAS from the water sources in sort of a inexpensive way. Those are all very exciting things. So as much as I have paranoia about AI doing those things, at the end of the day, I'm hopeful for a lot of those. Do you see that humans, or how do we push humans to kind of find the beneficial solutions for AI and to keep pushing down that road, as opposed to going off the rails of your concern, where humans would use AI against other humans? How do we get to a point where we can create laws around AI, given perhaps the age of Congress and the lack of sort of interest Congress has maybe seriously shown in this, or the slowness to come up with new laws? Like, what's a good way to kind of get Congress knowledgeable about this stuff to create laws in a fast enough way to keep up with the technology, so we don't have somebody use an AI model to say figure out how to siphon a bunch of money out of the stock market, and then one person in the world has $1 trillion, and then you have a depression or whatever. Sorry, I keep coming up with these these nightmare scenarios, but I'm just throwing that out there as an example. How do we get Congress up to date with the technology fast enough to keep up with technology?
So the mistake that we end up, so by the way, I will say I've testified before Congress a few times, and I have been in what I'll call controversial subjects around, for example, education and access. And I've testified around AI. And what I will say about the AI meetings is that they genuinely want to understand what's going on, whatever letter is next to their name. Like, they seem to really care. And there's much less partisanship, much less grandstanding. They just really want to know what's going on. So that gives me a lot of hope that they actually are trying to do the right thing here. Sure. Yeah. When I in front of a room full of Democrats and Republicans, the Democrats are more likely to emphasize safety and equity, and the Republicans are more likely to emphasize a free market. But those are on the edges. Both of them are more concerned about really knowing what's going on and how it's going to apply. And that warms my heart. Like, it really is a thing that people seem to really care about getting right and learning. So I think that's really good news for people who aren't necessarily paying attention to having those conversations every day. So I feel really good about that. Yeah. So the very first step is the fact that they actually realize that this is a thing that's worth thinking about. And I think the second step is understanding that these tools really can be misused, and that what you have to do is think very carefully about how the way they're going to get misused is not through ignorance of how they work, or even ignorance about what they're capable of, but our own ignorance about the way our own biases generate poor decisions. Because what the real danger here is, when it's kind of just everyday life, it's not really the case about siphoning money illegally. That's already illegal. It's really the case of creating an automated way of making the poor decisions we already make faster and more efficient. And then, because it's being done by a computer instead of by a person, assuming it must be correct and must be objective. It's not. All the machines are doing is what we're asking them to do. And we're asking them to do something good, they will do something good. We're asking them to do something bad, they will do something bad. They'll just do it faster than we might have done it. So I could pick 1,000 examples from this, but imagine, for example, we have real things around mortgage loans, for example, right? Or whether we think someone should have a longer sentence, or whether they should be granted parole. There's all kinds of built-in biases. We know them, right? Like, you want to go before a judge before lunch, not after lunch, or after lunch, not before lunch. These things are real. If we automate the biases into the system, then we're going to do much, much, much worse. So just knowing that, and then trying to build systems that address that directly, will prevent us from doing lots of horrible things to one another that we otherwise might do. I think that's the single most important thing to avoiding having the tools sort of accidentally be used to hurt people and to make things worse than they already are.
And my brain immediately goes to, how can the average person be on alert for this right now? And then it goes right to, like, a lot of the fake news stories and all of that, and people don't necessarily know what's real or what to believe. And I think that's kind of leading into the question of, what can your average person do to, like, help with that in their own lives now, I guess. Like, for instance, you go on ChatGPT, it gives you something. Is it as simple as cross-examining the information on ChatGPT and confirming the sources? Are people going to have to sort of take on that role that journalists or researchers have taken on historically in order to find accurate information? And is that something that you think is going to stick around? Or is there going to be maybe another system that can verify, is this true, that people will trust? Because there's not a lot of news sources people trust anymore, not a lot of information. How do people find that trust to not abandon the technology? Because I think we need good people using the technology, since the technology learns from us. Do you have any thoughts on that? A system that could be created or is being created I'm not aware of?
So it's a regulation question, right? So let's take your example of news and social media, right? Which reminds me that we're living on the tail end of Amara's Law. You should ask me about Amara's Law after this. So the problem with our news sources and social media is that we want to be told the things we already believe are true. And the companies that build these things, the people who build these things, their incentive and motivation is to get you to do more clicking, to get you to stay where you are, to get you to engage more, because it gets some more ad revenue or whatever. It doesn't matter. And I'm not saying those are bad things, but those are the motivations. You want your confirmation bias to be reaffirmed, and they want you to engage more. So that means that all I care about is building a system that gets you to engage more. Well, it turns out the way to get you to engage more is to make you angry. It turns out the way to get you engaged more is to make you get you into, these doom loops where I'm scrolling through Twitter or X or TikTok or whatever your favorite thing is, and just like getting more and more down the rabbit hole of whatever, because that gets more and more engagement. And if it's getting me down a rabbit hole that keeps reaffirming the thing that I thought I just learned, then that's even better. Combined with the world where I'm no longer the only person who thinks the crazy thing that I think, but I'm connected to literally 50,000 other people who are on some subreddit somewhere who also believe the crazy thing I think, then I'm getting more positive feedback that the crazy thing that I think is actually right. So I've got two sources of things about the wonderfulness of being connected to the world that gets me to have a really bad outcome. The only way around that is to change the incentives. So the incentives cannot be just more engagements. The incentives have to be that truth matters, or a variety of news sources matter to the people who are serving it up to you. And we have to believe culturally that it becomes a value that having seen 5 different things and drawing my own conclusion is better than seeing 5 same things and using that to draw my conclusion. So that's a technical question. It's actually a pretty easy technical question to answer.
Yeah.
It's a let's call it regulatory question. And then I think most importantly and most difficult is it's a cultural question. Like, we have to just decide that we value that diversity of exposure more than 5, 10, or 20 other things that we might value. That's the only way that we're going to kind of get from here to there, kind of change the path that we're walking down.
Are you hopeful that we can?
I am hopeful that we can. Doesn't mean that we will. I mean, the biggest threat to, discourse that we have is not that I now know more than I did before, that there's too much. It's that I choose to believe nothing. I have 10 newspapers I can read, and I used to pick 2 of them because I couldn't aggregate them. Mm-hmm. And a good outcome is that I get a broad exposure to what's going on. A bad outcome is it gets narrower and narrower and narrower as my preferences take over. But the worst outcome is that I see all 10 of them and I can't decide which one to believe. And so I just decide nothing matters. There is no truth. There is nothing that I can ever make a decision over. And therefore, I might as well just pick the thing that makes me feel good or makes me feel safe, which is actually what ends up happening in the end. And so I decide I have no agency. There is no truth. I'll just pick the thing that makes me feel the best for next Tuesday, and I'll just go from there. That's actually the worst case scenario, because then it doesn't matter. And
that's
you just
all.
Do.
Yeah, it's all politics. It's people elect based on how someone makes you feel. Like, and even a speaker, we didn't hear what you said, but we remember how you made us feel.
Yeah.
And so it's all a lot of rhetoric stuff, a lot of like BS, for lack of a better word. And as a stand-up comedian, I know that a lot of people who come to my shows will be like, "Oh, I saw your show. I loved it." And then if I say, "What was your favorite joke?" they'll be like, "I honestly can't remember any of them." You know what I mean? So it's just interesting to see that's where the power is. And if you look at our political landscape, that kind of makes a lot of sense. The way politicians, in the same way with our our social media algorithms, what they favor is the same thing politicians favor, and that's anger. And that's why we're all on the fringes if you read the news. But if you talk to people in person, it's not like that, because a lot of people have checked out. I don't read the news, you hear them say. So, okay. I mean, I think that what is the problem in our society today is the same problem that we see with artificial intelligence. And I think, as someone who's like deep in the technology side of it, and the culture side needs to be good in order for the technology to be good. Is there a time, or is there a sort of a discipline that focuses on how to like almost train people to help culture, to help benefit the culture? You know what I mean?
No, I do know what you mean. So, you asked me earlier why, what we're doing where I am that at UW-Madison that excites me. And, I talked about doing it at scale, and which I'm really out and thinking about human beings. But the other part of it is, look, UW-Madison is a great place. I think we all know that. But one of the things that I don't know that people appreciate about it is that it really does have everything. I have 32 direct reports as the provost. There are 17 deans, and there's 13 schools and colleges. There's vet med, there's SNPH, that is the health and medical school. There's a school of human ecology. There's engineering. There's nursing. I could name all of these things. What's great about that is when we think about AI and we build these systems, we are purposefully trying to build something that forces or encourages, maybe is a better word, all of those disciplines and ways of thinking together. So we're not just hiring a bunch of engineers and computer scientists who understand AI or want to understand AI. We're thinking about, well, what does it look like on the way this is going to impact humans? What is going to be the impact on equity? What's going to be the impact on education? How do we train people to think about these things? How do we expose them so that they can understand the consequences of using these systems? So our very first hire in this new big initiative is in the School of Human Ecology. It's a person who is thinking about the impact of this technology on people and how you shape the technology based upon human beings being involved in the design process. Like, it's the very first thing that we're doing. And so the answer to your question, insofar as we've got an easy answer, is you've got to involve people in the center of these conversations, and people who are thinking about how it's going to impact them, not just thinking about the next algorithm and how to make it more efficient, or the next machine and how to make it use somewhat less power while giving you the same outcome. You want to be like Apple, right? You want to think about the human experience, not just the hardware, the technology that's behind it, and you'll end up with a better outcome. Well, that's how I kind of think about what we're going to have to do to do that. It's going to be education and exposure, and people really understanding where this can go, both positively and where it can go very poorly if we don't think about it.
Folks, this show is powered and presented by Everlight Solar. Summer is almost here and the sun is out, and it could be powering your home. Go to everlightsolar.com, schedule your free consultation, see how solar panels might work for you. Make the most of this Midwest summer sun. Ladies and gents, power your home. And folks, I tell you what, Father's Day is almost here. And Fleet Farms got you covered when it comes to finding the perfect gift for dad. Whether the dad in your life is into grilling, power tools, fishing, hunting, they got something just right for everyone. Even if dad's favorite activity is just being comfortable. He's a comfies guy, you know? They got
Do you know what I'm thinking of?
Yeah. I don't want to go into that in this podcast.
Okay.
No, long story short, my girlfriend Randa, she was at the show in Madison, and she's like, we could get comfies on and go for a walk. And Adam Gruel heard it. He was walking by, and he's like, comfies?
No, he goes like this. Comfies?
Yeah. Comfies?
Well, I don't know.
That's some weird shit. Should we whack a beer and talk about how dumb that is, Charlie?
And then he goes to order 8 flatbreads. all in our comfies now.
Anyways, there you got your comfies for dads.
Brands like Carhartt, Columbia, and more.
Yep, they got it all. Shop this year. Dad Stay Deals. Find the perfect gift for every dad at the Fleet Farm. And folks, I got to tell you, Manitowoc Minute, Father's Day. We got you covered. Almost everything in the store is marked down for Father's Day. I'm talking the best-selling tees, dad hats, sweatshirts, even our Wisconsin-made oak cribbage board and Grandpa Bob's tackle box. Woo. We got recycled aluminum signs, old-fashioned glasses, and keep-her-moving pint glasses to pair well with some Barron's old-fashioned brandy. You can then get that barronsoldfashionedbrandy.com. And whole lot of gifts for you to get dad. All right. So check it out, manitowocminute.com, or you just go cripescast.com. Either one, click on the merch section. Bada bing, bada boom. You're cooking with gas. Back to our conversation with Provost Isbell. Well, it's really exciting, to talk to you and to hear you like define what all this is about, because it makes a lot of sense. And it's almost like I wish there was something that general public could have, like a system like you can do this to help the overall thing, like with the climate, right? You can drive an electric car, although that, of course, has its issues with strip mining. But, beyond that, it's largely better than an internal combustion thing. Steps that your average person could do. I think the best thing people can do generally is kind of love each other and express that, because so many people are not expressing it online, and almost get people to express it online to make the online discourse closer to love and have these machines learn love. Because I think most people who actually truly love have gotten off these machines because they're so, as you said, algorithmically inclined toward argument and toward rabbit holing and everything. Mm-hmm. And so, but that sounds so boring. You know what I mean? Like introduce love. So it's like, are there tangible things that the general population who might be concerned about this? And I believe in the upcoming years, a lot of people will be concerned about this. Can you give them tools to use online and in person in order to like help you guys do what you're doing? Because I think what's so important is places like the University of Wisconsin doing what you are heading over there. Because on the other end of it, you have companies where their main motive is to be the first and not necessarily the best. I mean, OpenAI is a perfect example of that. That was a company I was very excited about early on, but sort of the more I've gotten to know, the more questions I have, and not necessarily good ones. Sam Altman, who is the head of OpenAI, a lot of people have resigned just recently over concerns that he is prioritizing the benefit of the company getting to AGI first over the safety. And, when that's happening at they are one of the top competitors in that space, it is good, very good that, I think you coming from the university level and having this to kind of counter that. But can you at a university level counter something with the billions of dollars that OpenAI has access to?
Yes, because collectively we can touch billions of people, right? I mean, it's education and access, like a thing I care very much about. And I know there's a central value here. Look, one of the reasons why I came here from my previous place is because the Wisconsin idea is a real thing that people here actually care about. And if you can understand how the stuff that you do lines up with the Wisconsin idea, then you will do those things. So if we can educate people and help them to understand what's going on and what they can do to participate in it, particularly in designing the things that really matter for them, then we can have more impact than Google will have on their own, or OpenAI will have on their own, or pick your favorite or least favorite company will have on their own. I think that's crucial. That's the role that we're supposed to play, and the role that we need to play. But when you talk about, why it may or may not be good for OpenAI to do this, you described it perfectly. If the goal is just to be first, then the only thing that matters is being first, not to be good, not to have a positive impact on the world, but just to be first. So we have to be very explicit collectively on what our actual goal is. Is our goal to create AI, or is our goal to create things that will allow human beings to thrive in a planet, on a planet in a way that will allow the next generation, the generation after, the generation after that to thrive? In which case, AI may be a mechanism for that. AI needs to be a means to an end, not an end in and of itself. But that means we have to agree on the end in order to know what the means are going to be. And if we do that, then we have some hope, right? I mean, that's true for all technology, right? It doesn't always work that way, right? I mean, the engineer's fallacy is someone gives you a problem to solve and you solve it without asking whether that's the right problem to solve. We need to get beyond that and say, well, what's the right problem to solve? And if we can get broad agreement on that, then we can ask ourselves what's the best way to do it, what the trade-offs are. And AI, computing, networking, name your favorite things, will help us to get there. Mm-hmm. I really believe that, by the way. I mean, the reason I'm optimistic is I think in the end, people want to survive. And in the end, people want their children to survive and their great-grandchildren to survive, or someone else's children and someone else's great-grandchildren to survive. And if we can connect for people how the decisions that we're making now actually will matter for our descendants, whether they're ours directly or someone else's, we will make better decisions. When we only think about the next moment, that's when we make poor decisions.
That's it right there. And that is something that I'm hopeful that people can really latch on to. And I think America often, historically, culturally, thinks about the next moment, the next 4 years, or the next 4 years for president, the next whatever. What's the stock market doing? Not 100 years from now, not 50 years from now. What's it doing today? What's it doing tomorrow? And people trade based off of that. Like, what's it looking like for maybe 6 months down the road, a year from now, or whatever. And that's a much different thing that leads you kind of more into money. Like, that's the reason that OpenAI is racing to find AGI, is there's a huge pile of cash waiting at the other end of that, and power. And there's also national security risks about which country develops AGI first, to your point, if they can do that. So it's a complicated thing, but yeah, if we as people, and I don't just mean people of this country, but the world now, and this is where I start talking like a hippie and a lot of people tune out, but if we as people can prioritize exactly humanity over just our flag or your flag, or our company over your company, start talking to each other, that's where there's so much hope in this, to the point where I think that this technology can help solve a lot of our problems as opposed to create more of them. I am really trying to be hopeful, as you are, that is going to happen. And I think what would help in the long term is almost tools to help create that. And I think people hearing from you is going to be a great tool. So really appreciating your time on this, which, by the way, I know I don't have a ton of. So I wanted to ask, you said there was a law that I should ask you about. Which law was that?
Amara's law. And by the way, we've been indirectly talking about it for the last several minutes. So
okay.
Amara's law is very simple. It says we overestimate the short-term impact of technology and underestimate the long-term impact. And computing is a perfect example of this, and AI is going to be a perfect example of this. When computing became kind of broadly available, let's pretend that's early 1990s. That's not quite true, but close enough. The World Wide Web started to take off, and we started to see people connecting. There were all these predictions about what it was going to do. Almost none of those predictions came true over the next 4 or 5 years. But you know what did come true? Social media, which almost certainly impacted at least one election, is directly connected, at least the data suggests, to sense of isolation, all kinds of bad things around how the current population feels about itself, dissemination of misinformation as much as information, all on the negative side. But on the positive side, it's democratized information. It's provided mechanisms by which people can reach one another. The network and computing means podcasts exist where they didn't before. It means that I have, a phone that could have done all the work to land the machine on the moon, which is just sitting in my hand. I've got a watch on my wrist that can do all kinds of things that weren't possible before. People who were stuck in the world can now find connections everywhere. We didn't actually see how much that would impact society 20, 30, 40 years from now. We only saw the possibilities 2 or 3 years out. And when it didn't turn out the way we thought it would 2 or 3 years out, people kind of gave up on it. But it's radically changed the world. So around AI, for me, the question isn't what's going to happen next week or next year, and are we going to get AGI by 2027? The question is, what is the world going to look like in 2045? And what do we need to do to shape that world now so that we end up in the right place? You said something, you talked about love, you talked about connecting to the world. I think if I wanted to sort of distill it to 2 things, I would say that you really want to be thinking about what's best for everyone, not just yourself. And you want to be thinking about what's best for 40 years from now, not just 4 months from now, right? The longer time span, the longer horizon that you use to think about impact, the better off you are. And the more you think about how it's going to impact 1 billion people instead of the 2 people in your family, the better off we are. So that, if you think about it that way, so here's a really simple analogy. Mm-hmm. It makes no sense to go to college. None. It costs too much money. You could have gotten a job and made money and taken care of your family right now. Makes no sense, period. If you're a short-term thinker and you're only thinking about yourself and the people immediately around you. On the other hand, it is absolutely the case, particularly in today's world, particularly in a world where AI is taking over and you need to know more, that you should take the 3, 4, 5 years to go to college, because 20 years from now, you will make an order of magnitude more money, have more resources. You'll be able to impact not just your immediate family, but the kids you may have, the cousins you may be able to help, the parents who are going to be older and are going to need support from you. But that's a 20-year, 30-year view. So if it makes no sense to do something now, it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. To know whether it makes sense to do something, you have to ask yourself, how many people is it going to impact 10 years from now? And will I be in a better place by doing this thing 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and 30 years from now? We make these decisions all the time individually with our own lives, when we trade off money now for money we'll get later, or not having the cookie today so that we don't have to worry about type 2 diabetes tomorrow. And we just need to think about that at the scale of huge swaths of technology, the scale of voting, at the scale of making decisions that are going to impact the community. AI is going to accelerate that for us because it is moving exponentially. The decisions we're making now are going to have much bigger impact 20 years out. And if collectively we can start thinking about that kind of impact through this technology, then we'll end up in a much better place than we would if we just kind of let it go on its own because we're only thinking a week or 2 out. That's my belief.
Super, super well said, and very happy again that you're in the position you are leading this charge, because certainly this conversation has brought a lot of hope for me where I had been on the more pessimistic side. Still, I think there's a lot of work for all of us to do. I mean, what you are talking about requires an active participation by everybody and not for us to bury our head in the sand. As I'm looking over at Kelly and I see she's got that microphone right in her hand. So I want to see what her question is for the...
It might be a dumb question. Charlie referenced movies before, like kind of how AI is depicted and all of that. And the one that I go to first is WALL-E. And I know that's like a different, very like animated movie, but you were also talking about like the chess game. And in order for it to be working at its highest ability, it's technology and humans and working together to make it an easier life for the humans. But I also go to the idea of like making it easier. Like, does that stop the progress of what people can do? And like, are we going to take this and make it like easier for us, but then like, I don't know, not pushing ourselves mentally, if that makes sense?
It does make sense. So 2 things. One, just about WALL-E. Oddly enough, I was just having this conversation about WALL-E like 3 hours ago.
And you're primed for it.
It's one of my favorite movies. You know what's really amazing about WALL-E? Like the first 30 minutes, no one speaks.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
yet we're
that's true.
completely absorbed by it. And more importantly, your 6-year-old is completely absorbed by it. No one's talking. It doesn't feel as if any plot is happening, and yet just completely engrossed in the experience of what we're seeing. You know, a character who has a personality, who's developing, you do all this world building. All of these things are kind of happening in the background, and you're just completely engrossed in it because of the way it's sort of creatively put together. And I just think it's a great thing about WALL-E. The question of whether we can atrophy our intellectual muscles, I think the answer to that is yes, of course we could. In the same way that by having levers and machinery, we can become fatter, less strong, all kinds of things that can happen to us. But I don't think that's what's going to happen. What's going to happen is we're going to have these tools that are going to allow us to ask more interesting questions. And very importantly, and I think that this is a thing that's been throughout this whole conversation, is what human beings can be really good at when they're free to do so, is to figure out the right questions to ask in the first place, right? So if we can use this technology to help us think more broadly, and so that we're asking the right questions, we're not actually going to lose out on the thing that makes us interesting and intelligent. Instead, we're going to start thinking about possibilities we weren't going to be able to ask or be able to think about before. If we're spending all of our time worried about where our next meal is coming from, it becomes very difficult to think about what we're going to have to do to get off the planet and colonize space, or what we're going to do to cure cancer, or how we're going to extend our lives or deal with climate change. If this technology can free us from the sort of low-level intellectual labor and free us to think broader thoughts, then we will be better off. If it doesn't do that and we don't do that, then yes, we will atrophy. But it's okay. Calculators didn't destroy our ability to do math, despite the fact, fewer people can do long division, or nobody knows how to use a slide rule anymore. It instead, computers gave us the ability to ask new questions and to do more. And I think that's just fine. And I think that that's where we're going to end up. So no, it's not a bad question. It's a great question. And I think that so long as we are mindful of it, we will actually end up in a better place intellectually than we would be without this technology to help us think broader and more strategically.
When you were speaking to Congress, did you bring up a lot of the idea of thinking 40 years as opposed to 2 years, or 40 years as opposed to a year? And
some of it. I mean, I will tell you the thing that I focused on the most, part because I'm an educator, is it's not just enough that you or people named Charles. I mean, people named Charles should rule the world. So I agree with all that.
I think so. That's why I'm happy we're developing this relationship right now, because I can't do what you do. So
it's clearly the right thing. Charles means man or manly, by the way. I don't know. Anyway, I think it's a cool thing.
Yeah.
But the way that we're going to move forward, right, is that everyone is involved, because only different people have different experiences and help us to kind of think things through. When we look at the bad uses of AI technology, a lot of it boils down to we didn't think about how the technology was going to be used. We didn't involve the end user in the design. We didn't see how it would impact them and give them an opportunity to invest in the way that we think about these things, either through education or through the design of a specific artifact. What I think matters the most, beyond the thinking for the future and thinking broadly, is the democratization of the technology and engaging people in building that future and as wide variety as people as possible. When we talk about things like a lack of diversity, we tend to focus on invisibility, which is the right thing to focus on. But I think we fundamentally misunderstand it, right? We think of invisibility as things like you're in front of me and you don't see me. And that's real. But the real invisibility, the thing that'll lead us down the wrong path, is that you're not in the room and I don't notice your absence, right? I will be making decisions for you and for a whole set of people who aren't a part of the conversation. That will lead to disaster. What's great about our interconnected world, what's great about the technology getting out there, what's great about ChatGPT being accessible to anybody, is they can now participate in the ongoing conversation, and that we can learn from the experiences that they have that I don't have, or that this other person doesn't have. That's the promise. The downside is that if we don't educate people on these things and let them understand what the power is, they might not take advantage of it. So if we can do the latter thing, then that'll make the former thing that much better.
Yeah, and I think what I see is a lot of folks who are maybe, and now recently there's a big push against like the diversity, the equity, the inclusion. That's become a political sounding board for a lot of people because it's because of social media has made that whole thing bad for one side, good for another side. But exactly what you're saying, if we invest in people as perspectives, like every human being it's kind of like coral or a forest, where like the interconnectivity, you see these separate trees, but below the ground, they are all connected. And not only are they connected, but they are helping each other and they live symbiotically. People's perspectives do that. And as we kill people in war, as we force people into poverty and do all that, we are just hurting ourselves. And I guess what I'm saying is, if you're not going to include people for the right reason, include people selfishly, because the way humans work is we give each other ideas that we can then use to make the world better. And again, this is where you start talking like a hippie, but it makes a lot of sense when it comes to you have more influences. You want to feed your models more information. These AI models that are fed less information, they need more information. If they don't have it, they hallucinate or they turn on each other. So, I mean, it's almost like why, and it even goes down to like how we treat criminals in a lot of ways. Even the hardest criminals, the people who have done the worst things, the fact that an option on the table is killing them, is the death penalty, just takes away our ability to understand why they did that in the first place, which takes away our ability to understand that and therefore prevent it from happening again. And I just feel like as society, we're constantly shutting ourselves away. And with social media, to your point, we are doing more and more of it, of shutting anybody away, burying ourselves in the sand of people we don't agree with. So I think hand in hand with developing this technology, we need that exponential rise of changing our mindset to truly love and do what all these religious books are telling us to do, but we have never really listened, and love your neighbor as yourself. The reason you do that isn't just because it's a good thing to do. It's also so you can learn from your neighbor. I mean, I don't know. That's sort of the track of the mind that I go to on this. Let me step off that soapbox real quick and ask you, China has been much better at what you were saying we need to do with AI, and that is thinking 40 years, 100 years down the line, and not just 2 years as we do here in America. China is also geographically positioned very close to Taiwan. Taiwan it is the semiconductor capital of the world. Semiconductors are integral in the process of AI. Does that raise any thoughts or concerns for you?
Selfishly, the U.S. needs to invest in all of the things that are going to be necessary to keep it competitive in AI, computing, and 15,000 other things, including, by the way, electric power, including renewable energy. I mean, there are 4 or 5, maybe there's 1,000, but there's a whole bunch of things that are going to change the world, and we need to invest in all of them so that we can perpetuate our values and ourselves. I try not to think of it as a competition between countries. I mean, it is, but it's more important. Even if it weren't a competition, we would still want to be investing in these things and being really, really good at it. So we should just do that. If we don't, we're going to lose out. Someone else will do it. They'll lead it. We might regret that later, selfishly and locally. But also, I kind of believe that we have the potential to be the best at it. And so it's better for us to invest in it and be good at it. So let's just do that. I can do that. I can tell that story from a negative and fear-based way. I can tell that from a positive and hopeful way. whichever way you get there, we still want to do exactly the same thing. So let's just do that thing.
And do you see us doing it?
I see us worrying enough about it that we might just do it if we don't get distracted by other things.
All right.
Ask me again in a year or 2 or 3.
Okay. That sounds good. Before I let you go, is there anything sort of that I said in the course of this interview that, that that didn't sit right with you, that maybe other people are kind of thinking the same thing that you like? I have a feeling like when I go down the negative side of the world, that's kind of one of those things. But is there anything you think I'm off base on with any of this?
No, I mean, I do think that we need to recognize that it can be upside if we push on the upside, and that we always have to worry about the possible negatives, whether it's paranoid or not. I mean, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're out to get you, right? So we have to think about what the negative consequences are, because it's the only way that we're going to move forward on the positive side of it. So no, I mean, by the way, I will tell you, bottom line, I don't think we're creating AGI in the next 5 years or in my lifetime. I just don't. We are going to build really, really smart things that are going to have a massive impact on the world and on ourselves in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years. And that might as well be the same thing. So we need to be thinking about that, regardless of whether we would call it AGI.
Got it. Well, this has been so enlightening and awesome. And I hope, maybe we can continue this conversation in 6 months, because the technology will have risen exponentially since then. So,
that's right.
Well, really, really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much.
Anytime. I enjoyed it. I'm available. Find me. Let's talk some more. As you say, the world's going to be completely different in 6 months anyway.
All right. Well, sounds good. And on Wisconsin. And we're happy to have you here. So thank you. We'll see ya. Well, huge thanks to Provost Charles Isbell for coming on the show. Really hope to have him back on. And honestly, I meant to talk to him about his background at MIT and all of that, and I completely forgot. And this
is an excuse to have him come back.
Have him back on.
Yes.
And he also mentioned higher education. And I know some of you out there are like, I can't go back to school, or
I don't have the time, money, resource, all that.
Yeah, I think the deal there is, even if it's not traditional higher education, to really do yourself a solid and educate yourself on this technology and the changing technology, just so you're as prepared as possible for sort of the changing work environments that could be happening. They're already happening, but maybe it hasn't hit your line of work yet. But at the end of the day, we're just trying to help you guys be as prepared as possible. Yep. I think about from terms of my job and my
day, every waking moment,
and my company. No, I do. And so, though I get a little paranoid about it, that's unnecessary. It's just how my brain works. But just trying to be
curious.
Yeah. I want you guys to be curious and to enjoy it and find the joy in it. And we need good people embracing technology, because these machines learn from people. So we can't have them just learning the crap that we put on the internet, because social media tell you, like, could you imagine? And I think we can imagine, but if AI is just learning from social media, we are screwed, because people are so vile and hate-filled there.
And it's just TikTok dances.
Yeah, I know. So whatever you can put online, please make it positive. And even if you disagree with someone, find a polite way to disagree with them. This idea of just attacking people is not helpful to you, because if you attack someone, like, you could easily get attacked the same way. But
the way my mom says it, it's like, and I'm sure it's not just, she didn't come up with it herself. Love you, Jan, but you didn't. It's like taking poison and expecting the other person to be affected by it. Like, that's how anger is.
Right.
It's taking poison and expecting someone else to reap the consequences.
True. Or I am rubber, you are glue. Whatever you say bounces off me and sticks to you.
It's more energy to frown than it is to smile. Like, literally, it takes more energy for you to be angry than it does to be positive.
But it feels so good sometimes, doesn't it?
Sometimes righteous anger feels really good. And I won't lie to you. I mean, this is all these things. And I'm in a good space right now. And I can say this right now. But talk to me when I get pissed.
Yeah.
I won't feel the same way.
Anyways. All right. Well, thank you guys for listening. We really appreciate it. Check out all the great stuff, the Wisconsin idea and all that. Go to the University of Wisconsin website. Is it still wisc.edu?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I should see if my old email is working.
I don't want to see if mine is. Some things are best left in the past.
It's true.
I can't. Yeah. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. How I awkwardly wrote emails in college. But thank you all for listening. Everybody keep her moving. Enjoy your week. Tell your folks we says hi.
Tell your dad.
Tell your dads. Yeah. And watch for deer. All right. Bye-bye.
So roll out the barrel and get the band brewing. Life's got you down. Just keep her moving. It's on Wisconsin. The Badgers say it's the old Wisconsin Jubilee.
You know, sometimes when you're ice fishing, you put your foot in the walleye hole and go ass over tea kettle and you think you're done. No, you gotta keep her moving.